Have you ever asked yourself, why do the people I help the most hurt me the deepest? Why does loyalty crumble when you need it most? Today, we're diving into a brutal truth that most won't dare to speak. People betray not because they are evil, but because they are human. And Machiavelli understood exactly how and why betrayal happens. If you've ever been betrayed, this video will change how you trust forever. Betrayal. That bitter taste in your mouth, that sting in your chest when someone you trusted turns their back on you. You think it was personal, you think it was emotional, but here's the uncomfortable truth Machiavelli forces us to face. It was strategic. People do not betray you by accident. They do not fall into treachery like slipping on a wet floor. They calculate, they weigh, they measure. And when betrayal serves their interest, when it advances their agenda, when it removes an obstacle, when it gets them one step closer to power, they act coldly, efficiently, without remorse. You see, in Machiavelli's world, and in ours, loyalty is not a default setting. It is a temporary alignment of interests. They were with you only as long as it benefited them, as long as your presence added value to their ambition. The moment that value declined, or worse, threatened their rise, your downfall began. You may have called it a friendship. They called it a stepping stone. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes with brutal clarity, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose." Why? Because love fades, affection is fickle, gratitude disappears. But fear sticks, fear keeps knives sheathed, fear keeps betrayal delayed, and yet you wanted to be loved. You believed loyalty could be earned through kindness. You thought that giving more, being generous, being forgiving, would inspire devotion. But in the real world, those things don't inspire loyalty. They inspire entitlement. The more you give without boundaries, the more people expect. And when you finally say, no, that's when they call you selfish. That's when they twist the blade. They were never loyal to you. They were loyal to what you gave them. Understand this: in every relationship, professional or personal, there is an unspoken contract, a balance of power, of benefit, of leverage. When that balance shifts, when someone sees a path forward that does not include you, they choose themselves, and most of them will not hesitate. Not because they're monsters, but because they're human, driven by self-interest. Exactly as Machiavelli described, he never painted men as noble or evil, he painted them as opportunists. He said, men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. But what he really meant was this: men are driven by gain. So what happens when betraying you becomes more profitable than staying loyal? They switch sides, and they'll rationalize it. They'll say you changed. They'll say you weren't fair. They'll say they had no choice. But the truth, they made the choice the moment the cost of loyalty outweighed the reward. This is why betrayal always feels so sudden to the betrayed, and so obvious to the betrayer. You didn't see it coming, because you were looking through the lens of sentiment. They were looking through the lens of strategy. Every interaction, every compliment, every moment of silence, they were calculating, waiting for the right moment to shift the board in their favor. And you, still playing by the rules of honor and trust, never noticed the pieces moving. This is why Machiavelli never advised rulers to depend on loyalty. He advised them to create conditions where betrayal was dangerous, where consequences outweighed temptation. Because if people think they can get away with betraying you and profit from it, they will. They won't feel bad. They won't feel guilty. They'll feel justified. Why? Because in their mind, you became irrelevant. Your usefulness expired. And that, in the language of power, is worse than being hated. It's invisible. So if you were betrayed, don't just ask, why did they do this to me? Ask, what did they gain? Ask, what part of me became unnecessary to their ambition? Ask, where did I make it easy? This isn't about turning into a tyrant. It's about understanding the game that's being played around you. It's about seeing betrayal not as a failure of morality, but as a move in a larger strategy. And once you see betrayal that way, you stop feeling broken. You start becoming dangerous. You think betrayal is a storm that appears without warning, but the truth is far colder. You invited it. Not with your words, Not with your actions, but with your openness. You made yourself vulnerable. This is not something you'll want to hear, because in your mind, vulnerability is virtue. You believe that by being kind, by being open, by being generous, you show strength. But in the world of Machiavelli, that kind of openness is an invitation. It is the unlocked gate. It is the unguarded throne. It is the silent permission to strike. Understand this. Betrayal does not happen in darkness. It happens in clarity, because you revealed too much. You showed them where you were weak. You told them what you feared. You handed them a map of your emotional architecture, and you thought they would protect it. But what they saw was something else, a pathway, a weapon, an opportunity. You told them about your past, your failures, your doubts. You wanted to be understood. They pretended to understand. But they were studying. They were taking mental notes. Because people, when they seek power, do not observe you for empathy. They observe you for leverage. Machiavelli knew this. He advised rulers to be like the fox and the lion, strong when necessary, but cunning always. You were neither. You thought transparency would create connection, but in a world ruled by self-interest, transparency often creates targets. You exposed your heart and thought they'd protect it. But once people know your desires, they know how to control you. Once they know what you love, they know what to threaten. Once they know what you fear, they know how to manipulate. And the most dangerous part, you gave them access without requiring allegiance. You gave them power without demanding loyalty. You gave them a presence in your life without requiring them to earn it. And people do not value what is freely given. They value what costs. They respect what is rare. They protect what is dangerous to misuse. You were too easy to reach, too easy to read, too easy to hurt. And in this mistake, you created the perfect conditions for betrayal. Look at history. Look at the great men brought down not by their enemies, but by their allies. Caesar stabbed by those he embraced. Kings dethroned by the very advisors they elevated. Because they believed that favor creates loyalty, but favor only creates dependency. And dependency always breeds resentment. The more you do for someone, the more they begin to see you as the obstacle to their independence. They begin to resent their need for you. And when they feel strong enough to walk alone, they don't walk away. They push you down. Because in their minds, it was never your help, it was your control. And your vulnerability becomes the justification. They tell themselves you were weak. They tell themselves you were holding them back. They tell themselves you would have done the same, but you wouldn't have. Because you were loyal. But here's the truth. Loyalty only protects those who know how to protect themselves. You made yourself vulnerable because you wanted intimacy. You wanted trust. You wanted to be seen. But in the realm of power, being seen is a liability. The less they know about you, the harder it is to betray you. The less they can predict your moves, the less they can manipulate you. Machiavelli did not write about transparency. He wrote about control. He said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." That's not just a warning. That's a tactic. Appear kind, but do not be soft. Appear trusting, but never lose control. Appear open, but reveal nothing you cannot afford to lose. Because once they know how to hurt you, they already have the knife. They told you to lead with your heart, to trust your feelings, to listen to your intuition. But what they never told you was that emotion is the easiest way to blind yourself. You don't see betrayal when it's wrapped in a smile. You don't hear deception when it speaks in the voice of someone you love. Emotion turns your enemies into allies, and worse, it turns your predators into victims. It clouds the only tool you have for survival, your judgment. Machiavelli didn't write for those who want comfort. He wrote for those who want power. And power does not tolerate sentiment, not because it is cruel, because it is efficient. When you are ruled by emotion, you cannot make clean decisions. You begin to justify things that should be punished. You forgive too quickly. You overlook too much. And you convince yourself that someone's intentions are more important than their actions. That is how betrayal is born. Because the one who seeks to betray you knows your heart is the weakest point in your armor. They don't need to overpower you. They just need to move you. They get close to you not through threats, but through warmth. They feed you compliments. They mimic your values. They mirror your pain. And you, in your emotional hunger, see this as truth. But they are not connecting, they are calculating. Machiavelli once wrote, "A wise ruler must learn how not to be good. Not because goodness is weakness in itself, but because the illusion of goodness can be used against you." Think of how many times you have ignored red flags because of history. How many times you defended someone because they were family, or a friend, or once helped you. How many times you said, "They would never do that," but they did, and you still couldn't accept it. Not because you lacked evidence, but because you were drowning in emotion. You confused loyalty with nostalgia. You confused trust with hope. And in doing so, you let them stay longer than they should have. You gave them another chance, and another, and another, until the final one cost you everything. Emotion does not just cloud judgment. It rewrites it. It tells you that you are wrong for feeling suspicious. It tells you to suppress your instincts. It makes you question your own perception, all for the sake of keeping the peace, preserving the connection, avoiding the pain. But peace is temporary in the face of betrayal. And the connection you're trying to protect is often a rope tightening around your neck. A Machiavellian does not suppress emotion. They observe it in themselves and in others. They do not let it guide their decisions. They let it inform their strategies. Because people will try to manipulate you through emotion. They will cry when cornered. They will act wounded when they are guilty. They will accuse you of coldness when you begin to detach. And if you are not careful, you will fall for the performance. The modern world romanticizes the heart, but Machiavelli teaches you to study the mind. You think love makes people stay? No, power does. You think kindness makes people loyal? No, necessity does. You think honesty earns you safety? No, strength does. The problem is never that you felt. The problem is that you acted from feeling instead of from understanding. You trusted me because you were lonely. You stayed because you were afraid. You opened up because you needed connection. And in doing so, you handed them the blueprint of your downfall. Emotion is the storm that blurs the battlefield. You cannot see who is beside you and who is aiming at your back. You mistake the knife for a gesture of affection. Until it's too late, Machiavelli does not ask you to become heartless. He asks you to become sovereign over your heart, to use it but never obey it, to feel but never follow. You were taught to trust. You were told that trust is the foundation of all relationships. Without it, nothing works, and so you gave it, quickly, generously, blindly. But Machiavelli would laugh at this idea, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Because in the world of power, trust is not a virtue. It is a risk, and risks, if they are not measured, become disasters. You see, you thought trust meant strength. That being open, that believing in others, that giving the benefit of the doubt made you good. But it only made you vulnerable. You forgot one essential truth. Trust must be earned, not assumed. When you give someone your trust without leverage, you hand them control. You give them space in your world without requiring them to pay rent. And most people, once given something so freely, will test its limits. They will ask themselves, how much can I take before I'm stopped? Machiavelli understood this with surgical precision. He didn't say never trust. He said calculate your trust. Not based on emotion, not based on words, based on incentives, based on pressure, based on consequences. Ask yourself, what do they stand to lose if they betray me? Because if the answer is nothing, you are already in danger. People do not remain loyal out of love. They remain loyal when loyalty is more profitable than betrayal. If betrayal gives them more power, more access, more gain, and no punishment, they will do it, and then they'll call it moving on, or doing what's best for me, or finally thinking about myself. And you'll sit there, shocked, hurt, confused, not because they betrayed you, but because you never required accountability in the first place. You trusted without thinking. You believed their words. You thought past loyalty guaranteed future protection. But past loyalty is like past rain. It does not water today's fields. Machiavelli advised rulers to rule with caution, not sentiment. He said, A prince must learn how to act like both the lion and the fox. The lion uses strength. The fox uses strategy. Trust is a battlefield where you must use both. You offer just enough to keep them close, but never so much that they can strike you without consequence. You create systems where loyalty is rewarded, yes, but betrayal is punished immediately, severely, and publicly. This isn't about revenge. It's about preventing others from even considering disloyalty. And yet you gave people power without resistance. You let them know your thoughts, your fears, your weaknesses. You let them close because they made you laugh, because they said the right thing, because they shared your music taste. That is not trust. That is naivety. And in a world where power is currency, naivety is always exploited. Think of how you trust. You trust those who show affection, who remembers your birthday, who asks about your problems. But those are performances anyone can imitate. A smile is easy. A hug costs nothing. Even a well-timed apology is just another tool in the manipulator's box. What matters is what someone does when they have something to gain by hurting you. And choose not to. Not because they love you, because it's not worth the risk. Until then, trust is a locked vault. You do not open it with words. You open it with patterns, with history, with leverage. In Machiavelli's world, people are not devils. They are opportunists. They are merchants trading loyalty for advantage. And if you walk into the market without protecting your assets, do not be surprised when you are left with nothing. Trust is not a gift. It is a contract. And a contract without consequences is a joke. The moment you understand that, you stop expecting people to be loyal because you were kind. And you start designing relationships where disloyalty costs more than it offers. You were betrayed, yes, but not because the world is cruel, not because people are inherently evil. You were betrayed because you misunderstood the nature of loyalty, because you let your heart outrun your mind, because you trusted without leverage, because you exposed what should have remained hidden. Machiavelli did not promise a world of fairness. He promised a world of clarity, where betrayal is not an exception, it is a pattern, where loyalty is not born from love, but from structure, fear, and gain, where emotion is respected, but never obeyed, where trust is not offered, but calculated. You were taught to live by ideals, but those ideals made you blind to strategy. You moved through life assuming people would treat you as you treated them. But they didn't, because they never saw your goodness as strength. They saw it as a tool, a weakness to be used, a softness to be pressed against, and when the moment came, they acted. So now you stand at a crossroads. You can retreat, grow colder, lose faith in everyone, or you can become something else. Not a tyrant, not a monster, but a strategist, one who sees clearly, one who expects betrayal, not with paranoia, but with preparation. Because in a world built on power, only those who master perception, who shield their intentions, who reward wisely and punish quickly, who know when to speak and when to remain silent, only they remain untouched. Remember what Machiavelli whispered through the centuries. A wise man does not trust too much, nor love too easily, nor forget too quickly. Now you know why people betray, and now you will never be surprised again.